A teen went missing in the desert. 11 years later, a snake charmer finds something shocking in a rattlesnake nest. You must join our channel and hit subscribe, because only those who seek truth in the darkest places will do it before this story begins. The dry wind cut through the empty plains like a cold blade, stirring dust and brittle sagebrush into swirling patterns that chased each other across the cracked earth. Ethan Dalton stood at the edge of the desert, the half-moon hanging low and pale in the sky above, casting long shadows that stretched and writhed with the shifting breeze. His fingers tightened around the worn strap of his backpack, the leather scuffed and creased from years of use, but it was the crumpled map folded inside that he stared at most. His breath came in shallow bursts, fogging briefly in the chill night air. 11 years had passed since Sam vanished. 11 years of silence and unanswered questions that gnawed at Ethan's mind every moment. No search teams, no leads, just the empty desert and the stories whispered by Dustwell's townsfolk. But tonight, Ethan was not listening to rumors or fear. He was acting on something deeper, something that had pulled at him relentlessly. Brotherly love mixed with the sharp sting of guilt. He should have been the one watching over Sam, not the other way around. He looked out across the desert's dark expanse, where jagged rocks jutted like broken teeth and distant mesas loomed under the star-scattered sky. The wind carried with it the faint, earthy scent of sage and something else, something raw and unsettling, like a warning breathed by the desert itself. Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of years pressing down on him. His mind replayed that last memory of Sam, the boy's reckless grin, the spark of youthful defiance as he promised to return before nightfall. "I'll be back," Sam had said, voice light but charged with that careless bravado only a boy could have. Ethan's jaw clenched. That promise had gone unkept, swallowed by the endless sands and silence. He took a deep breath, trying to steady the knot of fear twisting in his gut. The desert was merciless, an unforgiving place where one misstep could mean death. People avoided it, kept their distance. They said it held secrets best left alone. But Ethan was no longer just a frightened brother. He was a man armed with determination and the desperate hope that somewhere out there, Sam's story wasn't finished. His fingers brushed the edge of the map again, rough, faded lines marking trails that hadn't been traveled in years. He knew the dangers, the wild animals, the treacherous terrain, and the lonely nights. But he had to try. With a last glance toward the dim glow of Dustwell behind him, Ethan stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into the dry sand. The wind howled louder, tugging at his jacket, as if trying to push him back. He paused, eyes scanning the horizon where the dark silhouette of distant dunes shifted like restless ghosts. Somewhere out there lay the answer, or at least a clue. A cold shiver ran down his spine, not from the desert chill, but from the feeling of being watched. Ethan shook it off. "I'm not afraid," he whispered aloud, his voice rough with resolve. "Not anymore." The desert's vast emptiness swallowed his words. As he walked, the crunch of dry earth beneath his boots was the only sound besides the persistent whistle of the wind. Every step felt heavy, laden with memories and the weight of the unknown. His mind churned with questions. Had Sam gotten lost? Was he hurt? Or worse, had something sinister claimed him? Ethan pushed the dark thoughts aside, focusing instead on the purpose that had brought him here. Hours passed, the moon tracing its slow arc across the sky, casting fleeting light on the jagged rocks and twisted scrub. Ethan's eyes strained to catch every detail. The broken branch here, a faint footprint there, anything that might lead him closer to his brother. The desert seemed alive in its silence, every shadow hinting at hidden dangers. His heart hammered in his chest as he pressed deeper into the wilderness, alone but undeterred. At one point, he stopped and knelt beside a patch of disturbed sand, fingertips tracing the fragile imprint of a small shoe. His breath hitched. Was it Sam's? He closed his eyes, willing the desert to reveal its secrets. Suddenly, a dry twig snapped nearby, and Ethan whipped his head around, eyes wide and searching the dark. Nothing moved. Only the wind whispered through the sagebrush. The desert was testing him, pushing him toward something he might not be ready to face. Yet he kept moving forward, step by cautious step, driven by a promise made long ago and a bond that not even time or distance could break. "This time, I'll find you, Sam," he whispered into the night. Ethan pushed open the creaking door of Dustwell's only cafe, the bell jangling weakly overhead. Inside, the air was thick with stale coffee and dust, mingled with the faint scent of leather and old wood. The place was nearly empty, save for a few weathered men hunched over chipped mugs, their faces etched with lines deeper than the desert itself. Ethan's boots thudded softly against the cracked tile floor as he scanned the room, searching for anyone who might remember the day Sam vanished. He approached a table where 3 old men sat in silence, their eyes flicking up to him with cautious curiosity. Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of his purpose settling firmly on his shoulders. "Excuse me," he began, his voice steady despite the knot twisting in his chest. "I'm looking for information about the day my brother disappeared, near the rattler's nest. Maybe you remember something, anything." The men exchanged glances, hesitation clear in their furrowed brows and tight jaws. One finally spoke, a dry rasp that matched the desert wind outside. "That place is cursed, boy. Best left alone." Ethan nodded, feeling the familiar sting of rejection, but he pressed on. "I don't believe in curses. I just want to know what happened to him." Another man, lean and wiry with a grizzled beard, snorted softly. "Most folks around here don't talk much about those days. You're stirring up dust better left settled." Just as Ethan was about to reply, a sudden clatter drew his attention to the far corner. There, sitting alone at a battered table, was a man unlike the others, a figure wrapped in a threadbare cloak, fingers dancing absently over a twisted wooden cane. His eyes, dark and piercing, caught Ethan's gaze with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "Jeb, the snake charmer." Ethan approached cautiously, heart hammering. "I'm looking for someone who might know what happened to my brother, Sam Dalton. I was told you might help." Jeb's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "You're brave to ask," he said quietly, his voice like gravel sliding over stone. "Or foolish. The desert doesn't give up its secrets easily." Ethan leaned in, desperate for any clue. "I need to find him. I can't leave without answers." Jeb's eyes narrowed, flickering with a strange light. "Mace wanders those sands. He's a man who understands the desert's whispers. But beware, boy. Some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered. They carry shadows darker than the night." Ethan swallowed, the unease curling in his gut. "Who is Mace? Why do people avoid him?" Jeb shrugged, a flicker of sadness in his gaze. "A keeper of riddles. Some say a cursed soul. Others a protector in his own way. But folks fear what they don't understand. Mace walks a lonely path." The cafe's door slammed open, a gust of hot wind sending a swirl of dust across the floor. The men around fell silent, eyes darting toward the entrance as a group of riders thundered past outside, their horses kicking up clouds that swallowed the horizon. Jeb's gaze locked on Ethan's, steady and unwavering. "If anyone knows where Sam went, it's that man," Ethan decided, gripping the worn leather of his jacket. The narrow dirt path wound perilously close to the edge of the cracked cliffs where rattlesnakes made their home, each step threatening to stir the desert's hidden dangers. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as he scanned the barren landscape, every dry twig snapping underfoot echoing like a warning. The sun hung low, casting long shadows that flickered like ghosts among the rocks and cacti. He spotted him then, a tall, lean figure standing motionless against the orange-hued cliffs, his posture calm but alert. Mace's dark eyes caught Ethan's gaze immediately, sharp and unblinking, seeming to cut through the shimmering desert heat and right into the core of his resolve. There was a strange stillness about the man, like he belonged to the desert itself. Ethan swallowed the lump rising in his throat and approached cautiously, the sweat on his brow mixing with the gritty dust clinging to his skin. He felt the weight of 1,000 questions pressing down on him, but Mace's expression revealed none of the answers he so desperately sought. Without a word, Mace reached down and scooped up a coiled rattlesnake, its scales glinting in the fading light. The snake hissed softly, tongue flicking, but Mace's hands were steady, moving with practiced ease. It was as if the snake trusted him, obeyed him, bound by some silent understanding beyond human language. Ethan's breath caught, a mix of awe and unease swirling inside him. If this man could command the desert's deadliest creatures, what else did he know? What power did he hold? Mace set the snake down gently among the rocks and turned to face Ethan fully, his face unreadable. "You're not from Dustwell," he said, voice low and gravelly, carrying the weight of years spent whispering to the desert winds. "Why come looking for me?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm looking for my brother, Sam. He disappeared near here 11 years ago." His voice cracked slightly, but his gaze remained steady, burning with a fierce determination. "People say you know the desert's secrets. I need your help." Mace's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might refuse. Then something flickered, recognition, regret, or maybe a buried pain. "You're chasing shadows," Mace said slowly, the words deliberate and heavy. "This desert hides more than lost boys. It hides things better left alone." "I don't care what it hides," Ethan replied, stepping closer, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "I have to find him. I have to know what happened." Mace studied Ethan for a long moment, then nodded once, sharply. "I'll help you, but it won't be easy. The place you need to go, where the desert keeps its darkest secrets, is called the Rattler's Nest. Few who enter come back unchanged. Fewer still come back at all." The weight of those words sank deep into Ethan's bones. He hesitated, his mind flashing to the warnings he'd heard, the stories whispered by frightened townsfolk. But the thought of Sam, his brother's careless smile, the promise to return, pushed him forward like a gale. Mace's gaze sharpened. "If you follow me there, you must be ready for what you'll see. It's not just snakes waiting in the nest. There are things out there no one ever should see. Things that will test your soul." Ethan swallowed hard, the desert air thick with dust and impending danger. His hands clenched into fists, knuckles white beneath the coarse leather of his jacket. "I have to be." The first rays of dawn sliced through the jagged horizon, casting long shadows over the cracked earth as Ethan and Mace advanced toward the Rattler's Nest. The desert was already waking, the air thickening with heat that clung to skin like a second layer. Each step crunched on brittle stones and dry sand, making the silence between them feel heavier. Ethan's boots kicked up tiny dust clouds, the faint scent of sage mingling with the sharp bitterness of creosote. His chest tightened with every step, not just from the heat, but from the weight of what lay ahead. Mace moved ahead with a fluid ease, his lean frame slipping through the rocky landscape as though he belonged to this harsh world. Ethan's eyes followed the snake charmer's confident stride, noting how his fingers brushed the edges of cacti without hesitation. There was a strange grace in his movements, a connection to the land that Ethan could only envy. Yet behind Mace's calm exterior, Ethan sensed something darker, a guarded tension, like a man carrying too many secrets. Breaking the quiet, Mace's voice was low and steady, carrying the weight of old warnings. "The Rattler's Nest ain't just a name. It's a place wrapped in stories. Some say it's treasure buried deep. Others say it guards something far worse." He glanced back at Ethan, eyes sharp beneath his weathered brow. "Folks around here steer clear of it. Not just because of the snakes, but because of what's protected there. It's sacred or cursed, depending on who you ask." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to push down the unease curling in his stomach. His thoughts raced back to Sam, the boy who had vanished 11 years ago, whose smile haunted his memories. What could the nest have to do with his brother? The possibility that Sam had been drawn into this dark legend gnawed at him. He fought to steady his breath, to keep his fear from overtaking the urgency burning in his veins. As they climbed higher, the desert stretched out like a sea of stone and sun. The jagged cliffs caught the light, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance with the morning breeze. The wind whispered through crevices, carrying faint rattles, an ominous reminder of the dangers waiting. Ethan tightened his grip on the leather strap of his backpack, feeling the rough texture bite into his palm. Mace stopped abruptly at the edge of a deep crevice, the ground falling away into an abyss of darkness. The rattling intensified, echoing faintly from below like a sinister heartbeat. He turned to Ethan, his face serious, the lines around his eyes deepening. This is where most give up, where the desert swallows the curious and the brave alike. His voice dropped, almost a growl. But for some, this is where the truth begins. Ethan peered down into the shadowed depths, his pulse quickening. The temperature seemed to drop despite the sun's growing heat, a cold breath of warning curling around him. His mind flashed with images of endless tunnels, hidden threats, and whatever had taken Sam so long ago. Yet beneath the fear, a fierce determination flared. He would not turn back now, not when he was so close. Let's go find your brother. The narrow crevice yawned before them like a jagged wound carved into the earth, its walls pressing inward with a suffocating closeness that seemed to swallow the fading daylight. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest, each beat echoing like a warning drum as he took the first cautious step downward. The air was stale and thick, carrying a faint musk of dust, dry stone, and something darker, something ancient and untouched. The walls were etched with strange, swirling symbols, faded but unmistakable. Spirals, snakes, eyes watching silently from centuries past. Their presence was a grim reminder that this place had stories told in silence and shadow. Mace's flashlight pierced the darkness, its beam steady despite the tension threading through the air. The rattling hiss of coiled snakes slid softly from unseen corners, their scales shimmering faintly in the pale glow. Ethan's skin prickled with unease, but Mace moved with a chilling calm, fingers brushing aside dry leaves and stones without hesitation. The snake charmer's familiarity with the deadly creatures was unsettling, as if he shared a language with them beyond human words. Ethan swallowed, his gaze flickering between the writhing forms and Mace's steady hands. Suddenly, Mace paused, kneeling beside a cluster of nests nestled deep in a hollowed crevice within the cavern wall. His fingers traced the edge of something buried beneath the rattler's coils, a small wooden box, weathered and wrapped in a cracked leather strap. With deliberate care, Mace coaxed the box free, never once faltering despite the snake's warning rattles that vibrated like a low threat. Ethan held his breath, the box now cradled between Mace's steady hands. "I found this near the time Sam disappeared," Mace said, his voice low and heavy, eyes darkening with the weight of memory. He handed the box to Ethan with a grave expression that seemed to pull the shadows closer around them. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he broke the fragile seal of the box, the old leather creaking beneath his fingers. Inside lay an assortment of objects, each whispering fragments of a story too long buried. First came a stack of worn photographs, their edges frayed and corners curled by time. Ethan flipped through them slowly, his breath hitching as he recognized Sam, his brother, smiling in the sun, younger and full of life. Yet something lingered behind those eyes, a subtle shadow, a flicker of fear or maybe knowledge that the others didn't see. Next was a dusty journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. Ethan's pulse quickened as he opened it, revealing entries scrawled in hurried, almost frantic handwriting. The words twisted and turned in code, hints and warnings written between the lines. The journal spoke of a hidden group that lived like ghosts in the desert's vast emptiness, referred to only as the Brotherhood. Ethan's eyes scanned the cryptic phrases, whispered meetings beneath the stars, silent watchers in the night, and threats that could shatter lives in an instant. He paused, tracing a passage that seemed to speak directly to him, words soaked with desperation. "Trust no one. They take what they want. The desert hides more than sand and bones." Ethan swallowed hard, the cold air feeling heavier in his lungs. He looked up at Mace, whose dark eyes reflected the flickering beam of the flashlight. "What is this place?" Ethan whispered, voice barely steady, a shiver crawling up his spine. "More dangerous than you think." Ethan's fingers trembled as he turned the fragile pages of the worn journal, the thin paper crackling softly under the weak beam of Mace's flashlight. The desert night pressed around them, the only sounds the distant call of a lone coyote and the faint rustling of rattlesnakes hidden nearby. Ethan's eyes darted across the hurried, jagged handwriting, fragments of thought scrawled with desperate urgency. Every word seemed to echo with fear and confusion, as if Sam had been writing against time itself. The journal was no ordinary diary. It brimmed with cryptic notes about men who moved like shadows in the desert, their voices barely more than whispers carried by the wind. Sam wrote of a brotherhood, an underground network that thrived in the barren expanse, tied to the unforgiving land like a secret root system beneath the sand. There were warnings scattered throughout, betrayals cloaked in friendship, eyes that watched from the darkness, and promises broken like brittle bones. Ethan's heart thudded harder with every line he read, the growing chill in the cavern no match for the cold dread curling in his chest. He swallowed, trying to steady his breath. Could his brother have knowingly crossed paths with such a dangerous group? Or had he stumbled into something far beyond his understanding? Ethan's mind reeled with possibilities, each darker than the last. He glanced sideways at Mace, whose narrowed eyes reflected a mixture of caution and something deeper, regret, maybe, or sorrow. The snake charmer's grip on the flashlight tightened as he spoke quietly, his voice low enough to blend with the desert's silence. Sam didn't just disappear by chance, Mace said, his tone grave. He was running from something or someone. The weight of that truth settled over Ethan like a stone, pressing into his ribs and squeezing his hope into a tight knot. The idea of Sam simply being lost in the desert was gone, replaced by a darker, more frightening reality. His brother wasn't just missing, he was hunted. Ethan closed the journal carefully, the sound of the pages folding like a whispered farewell. He rubbed his face with a rough hand, the gritty dust mixing with sweat. His jaw clenched as he forced himself to look at Mace, determination blazing behind his tired eyes. "We have to find out who this brotherhood is," Ethan said, voice trembling but steadying with resolve. "And why they wanted Sam gone." Ethan's boots crunched against the gravel as he and Mace climbed steadily away from the rattlesnake nest. The weight of what they discovered settled on Ethan's shoulders like a thick fog, heavy, suffocating. His heart hammered with a mix of fear and determination. Every shadow along the narrow path seemed to shift with hidden threats, the desert sun beating down mercilessly as if warning him to turn back. But turning back wasn't an option. Not now. As they reached the edge of Dustwell, the town sprawled before them like a ghost of better days. Weathered wooden buildings leaning against the wind, windows clouded with dust, and a stillness that felt unnatural. Ethan's eyes scanned the empty streets. The people inside these walls hid stories behind shuttered doors, stories too dangerous to share with outsiders. He knew he needed answers, but he also knew trust was a fragile thing here, easy to lose and nearly impossible to earn. The old saloon stood at the far end of Main Street, its faded sign creaking softly in the dry breeze. Ethan pushed open the heavy door, the scent of stale whiskey and aged wood swirling around him. Inside, the dim light revealed worn bar stools and a long counter scarred by years of rough hands. Behind the bar, Gus worked silently, polishing a glass with a rag that had seen better days. His face was weathered, etched with lines from countless hard years, and his eyes, sharp but tired, flicked up the moment Ethan entered. Gus's gaze narrowed as Ethan approached. "What brings you here?" His voice was low, cautious, like a man who had learned to measure every word. Ethan didn't waste time. "I need to talk about the Brotherhood." The name hung in the air between them, heavy and dangerous. At once, Gus stiffened. The rag slipped from his hand, and for a moment, he stared at Ethan as if weighing a silent threat. "You're poking at things better left buried," he warned, his tone rough but steady. His jaw clenched, and a flicker of fear passed through his eyes. Ethan's voice softened but held firm. "I don't have the luxury to walk away. My brother, Sam, he's caught up in this. I need to know what I'm dealing with." Gus ran a hand through his graying hair and sighed, the weight of years pressing down on him. He leaned in, lowering his voice until it was barely more than a whisper. "The Brotherhood isn't just a story, son. They control everything from smuggling to intimidation. Their reach is long, and their silence is bought with fear. His eyes flicked toward the cracked window as if expecting unseen watchers. And your brother? He crossed them whether he knew it or not. That's why he's missing. Ethan's breath hitched. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was darker than he had imagined. Where are they hiding? Who leads them? Gus glanced around nervously, then motioned toward the back of the saloon, where shadows deepened beneath flickering lanterns. Some say their leader haunts the abandoned mines east of here. No one knows who he is for sure, and almost no one who goes near those mines comes back to tell the tale. His voice grew grave. Those mines are more than just empty tunnels. They're a trap, a place where the Brotherhood's power is strongest. Ethan's fingers curled into fists at his sides. The knowledge ignited a fierce fire inside him. Then I'm going after him, no matter what it takes. Gus shook his head slowly, eyes heavy with warning and regret. Then you're walking into the devil's lair. The sudden, sharp rattle sliced through the still desert air, snapping Ethan's head toward the looming shadow just ahead. His heart slammed against his ribs as he caught sight of several figures stepping out from behind jagged boulders and thorny brush, their faces hard and eyes cold like the unforgiving desert stones. Each man moved with a slow, deliberate menace, blocking the narrow path to the mines. Ethan's breath hitched, a mix of adrenaline and dread flooding his senses. He tightened his grip on the strap of his backpack, his knuckles white as he scanned the grim set of their jaws and the faint gleam of weapons tucked beneath worn jackets. Mace's stance shifted instantly, muscles coiling with practiced alertness. His dark eyes narrowed beneath a heavy brow, a flicker of old pain and resolve crossing his face. You shouldn't have come here, the tallest man snarled, his voice low and rough like gravel grinding beneath boot heels. His lips curled into a cruel sneer, but his glare burned with the lethal warning of a man who ruled these lands by fear. Now you'll pay. If that moment sent chills down your spine, don't stay silent. Subscribe and become a member, because uncovering secrets takes courage. The harsh scrape of gravel under boots shattered the stillness as Ethan and Mace came face to face with the Brotherhood's enforcers, their shadows long and menacing in the low desert sun. The air seemed to thicken, pressing in on Ethan's chest, each breath sharp and ragged. His heart hammered like a war drum, threatening to drown out all reason. Around them, the jagged cliffs loomed like silent sentinels, but now the desert felt less like a protector and more like a trap closing tight. The enforcers moved with the cold precision of hunters who knew their prey well, their fingers resting lightly on holstered weapons, eyes dark and unblinking beneath wide-brimmed hats. Ethan's gaze flicked from one grim face to another, searching for a crack, a weakness, anything to shift the balance. Beside him, Mace's hand twitched toward the small knife at his belt, his lean frame taut and ready to strike like a coiled serpent. But Ethan's steady hand rose, cutting through the tension with a calm command. No sudden moves, Ethan said, voice steady despite the storm of fear clawing inside him. His eyes locked onto the leader, a man whose cruel smile barely masked the sharp edge of menace beneath. The leader's lips curled thinly, revealing no warmth, only a chilling confidence born of power and fear. Sam's fate is sealed, boy, the leader said, voice low and sharp, as if each word was a blade slicing through the desert heat. You should walk away before you lose more than your pride. But Ethan's jaw clenched. The desperation that had driven him across the unforgiving plains boiled to the surface. His voice grew firmer, trembling only with the weight of his determination. Where is he? What did you do to him? A sudden shift in the air caught Ethan off guard. One of the enforcers, a large, silent man with cold eyes, stepped forward, dragging a bundle wrapped tightly in rough cloth. Without a word, he dropped it at Ethan's feet, the heavy thud echoing like a verdict. Ethan's hands trembled as he crouched, the coarse fabric biting against his palms. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled back the layers, the desert wind tugging at the edges, as if eager to tear away the truth. Inside lay a piece of torn fabric, faded and stained, unmistakably part of Sam's worn shirt. Alongside it, a rusty dog tag, battered and scratched, glinted weakly in the fading sunlight. The sight hit Ethan like a physical blow. His breath caught, throat tightening as a cold dread seeped into his bones. He looked up, eyes meeting Mace's. The snake charmer's dark eyes flashed with pain, silent, deep, and raw. "He was here," Mace whispered, voice heavy with a grief that clawed beneath the surface. "And he fought back." The leader's gaze sharpened, his expression hardening as if savoring the moment. "But the desert always wins." The Brotherhood leader's cold eyes locked onto Ethan, a faint smirk curling his lips as he stepped closer, his voice low but heavy with menace. "Sam wasn't just some lost kid," he said darkly, his tone thick with warning. "He got involved in something he didn't understand." The words hit Ethan like a blow, twisting cold fingers around his chest. His gaze never wavered. "We took care of him because he threatened to expose us." The leader's eyes flicked toward the jagged mine entrance behind them, shadowed and foreboding. "He's somewhere in those mines, but he's not the boy you remember." Ethan's heart clenched painfully, his breath catching as a rush of images flooded his mind. Sam's carefree smile, the hopeful boy who vanished, now lost in a darkness far deeper than the desert night. Could his brother still be alive? Was he trapped underground, changed by horrors Ethan couldn't even imagine? The weight of those questions pressed down on him, a suffocating knot of fear and determination. Beside him, Mace's dark eyes burned with fierce defiance. His jaw tightened, voice steady but urgent as he stepped forward. "We have to go after him, before it's too late." The snake charmer's words cut through the tense silence like a blade, ringing with a resolve that left no room for doubt. Ethan nodded slowly, the fire of purpose igniting within him, pushing back the creeping shadows of despair. The Brotherhood men exchanged cold glances, their laughter rising, harsh, cruel, echoing off the rocky cliffs like the hiss of desert snakes. "You don't understand what you're walking into," the leader sneered, folding his arms. "Sam's fate is sealed." But then, without warning, the very ground beneath them trembled violently, a deep rumble that rattled bones and stirred dust in choking clouds. A sudden quake, or perhaps the desert's own fierce warning. Rocks shattered and fell from the craggy heights above, smashing to the earth with thunderous crashes. The Brotherhood enforcers scrambled, their faces tight with alarm as jagged stones scattered at their feet. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears, every muscle coiled like a spring as he instinctively dropped into a crouch, eyes scanning for the safest path forward. Mace's gaze sharpened, scanning the falling debris with a practiced eye. "Move!" he barked, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him to the side just as a larger boulder slammed down mere inches away, sending up a plume of sand and gravel. The air filled with the acrid scent of crushed stone and unsettled earth. The Brotherhood men, momentarily thrown into chaos, shouted orders, their earlier smugness replaced by raw urgency. Ethan caught the leader's narrowed gaze, no longer smug but calculating, weighing his options as the precarious cliffs threatened to bury them all. Slowly, the men began to back away, keeping their eyes fixed warily on Ethan and Mace. The dust thickened, swirling around them like a living thing, obscuring vision and filling lungs with grit. Ethan coughed, wiping sweat and dirt from his brow, the dry heat clinging to his skin. His voice was low but resolute as the last stones settled. "We're going in," he said, voice fierce and unwavering, "no matter the cost." Ethan stood frozen for a heartbeat at the mine's entrance, the yawning darkness ahead swallowing every trace of the daylight behind him. The jagged cliffs loomed like ancient sentinels, their weathered faces cracked and stained, silent witnesses to untold stories hidden beneath their shadows. Dust hung thick in the air, gritty and dry, invading his nostrils with each cautious breath. His flashlight's weak beam cut a trembling path into the blackness, revealing nothing but cold stone walls that seemed to close in tighter with every step. Beside him, Mace was calm, too calm. His eyes, dark and sharp, darted quickly, reflecting years of experience in places like this. The snake charmer's every move was deliberate, silent, like a shadow sliding along the walls. Ethan's fingers clenched harder around the flashlight handle, knuckles whitening. His heart thundered in his chest, a mix of hope and dread coiling inside him. This is it. Sam is here. Alive or something else. The sudden chill was a shock. It seeped deep beneath Ethan's jacket, chilling bones he didn't realize were trembling. The mine exhaled cold breath, as if exhaling secrets long kept. Strange markings appeared along the rough stone walls, symbols etched roughly but with clear intent, arrows, spirals, strange runes that Sam's journal had warned about. Ethan's eyes flicked from one to the next, his mind racing to connect the dots. These were not just warnings. They were desperate messages from someone trapped in fear and pain. Ahead, the faint sound of tapping echoed softly. At first, it was barely audible, like the slow heartbeat of the earth itself. But then the rhythm grew clearer, steady, a call for help, or perhaps a sign of life in this suffocating darkness. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "Sam," he whispered, barely daring to speak the name aloud. His voice cracked, fragile as the dust settling on the floor. Mace's eyes narrowed, shadowed by the beam of the flashlight. "He's close," he said quietly, voice low and grave. "But this place, it changes a man. You have to be ready for anything." There was a warning in his tone, an unspoken history that sent a ripple of unease through Ethan's resolve. Every step deeper felt heavier, as if the darkness itself was reaching out, trying to pull them back. Ethan's boots stirred up little clouds of dust, their soft crunches swallowed quickly by the cavern's oppressive silence. The walls seemed to breathe alongside them, closing in, shrinking the world to just this thin beam of light and the pounding in his chest. He tried to steady his racing thoughts. Sam isn't just a missing boy anymore. Something's happened to him here, something no one could have expected. But I have to find him. I have to bring him back. Doubt clawed at the edges of his mind. What if his brother was beyond saving? What if the desert had taken more than just his freedom? Mace suddenly stopped and held up a hand. Ethan froze, flashlight trembling in his grip. The tapping ceased. The silence grew so loud it pressed against Ethan's ears. Then, from a narrow tunnel just to the right, faint shadows shifted. A weak groan barely escaped from the darkness. Ethan's pulse surged. Hope flared, raw and desperate. "Sam!" he called again, stepping forward. The voice was thin, distant, but unmistakably human. The mind seemed to close even tighter around them, the cold pressing like a weight. Mace's hand rested briefly on Ethan's shoulder, a steadying grip. "Be ready," he said again. "This isn't just a rescue. This is a crossing into something else." Ethan swallowed hard, pushing down the fear threatening to freeze him in place. He adjusted his flashlight and moved toward the faint noise, each step a battle between hope and terror. The further they went, the more the walls were marked with scratches and stains, signs of struggle, of desperate survival. The darkness pulsed around them, alive with secrets they couldn't yet see. Shadows twisted and shifted at the edges of their light, teasing Ethan's mind with shapes that might be real or might be tricks of the eye. He thought of the boy he remembered, Sam, full of life and laughter. He wondered what he would find beyond this veil of shadows. The unknown loomed ahead, thick and suffocating, yet Ethan refused to turn back. "We're almost there." The labyrinth of tunnels seemed to close around Ethan like a living beast, walls twisting and splitting in endless, dark veins. Each step echoed sharply in the stale, suffocating air, his breath coming in ragged gasps as exhaustion gnawed at his limbs. Time lost meaning, minutes melted into hours, the torchlight flickering against damp stone, casting fleeting shadows that danced with every tremble of the flame. His mind fought to stay sharp, but the creeping fatigue threatened to drag him into a haze. Beside him, Mace moved steadily, silent as a shadow, eyes scanning every crevice with wary precision. Though his face was calm, Ethan caught a flicker of worry deep in those dark eyes, the kind that only comes from knowing a place's true dangers. Then, from the twisting depths ahead, a faint tapping broke the suffocating silence, slow, rhythmic, unmistakably human. Ethan froze, heart pounding, every nerve alert. The sound was fragile, yet it carried a desperate urgency that clawed at his chest. "Did you hear that?" Ethan whispered, voice barely more than breath. Mace nodded once, voice low and steady. "We're close." Turning sharply at a narrow bend, Ethan's torch revealed a hidden chamber, cramped and cold, carved from rough stone. The weak glow spilled over a figure lying on the floor, a man, pale and gaunt, wrapped in torn, filthy clothes. The face was hollowed, eyes sunken and distant, but unmistakably alive. It was Sam. Sam! Ethan dropped to his knees, voice breaking as he reached out to him. His fingers trembled while brushing the grime off his brother's face. Sam's body was frail, his hands scarred with raw cuts and bruises, the marks of desperate clawing against stone and dirt. The stench of dust and sweat hung thick in the air, mingling with the faint coppery scent of old blood. Sam's eyes flickered open, dull and unfocused, but when they met Ethan's, a strange chill rippled through the room. His voice was a weak rasp, laced with something eerie, almost foreign. "Ethan, you shouldn't have come." The words struck Ethan like a blow. His heart twisted between relief and dread. "I had to find you," he said, swallowing the lump in his throat. "You're not alone anymore." Mace stepped closer, his gaze sharp, scanning the shadows with growing unease. "He's been trapped here for too long, surviving on sheer will," Mace said quietly. But something changed inside him. "This place, it doesn't just break bodies. It breaks souls." Ethan's hands were steady as he helped Sam to his feet, supporting the fragile weight as his brother swayed. Sam's expression was distant, as if part of him lingered elsewhere, lost in the darkness of the mines. The cold stone floor beneath them seemed to press in, the air heavy with silence, broken only by the distant drip of water echoing through the tunnels. Suddenly, from the blackened mouths of the twisting corridors, movement stirred. Shadows shifted and elongated. Figures emerged, stepping into the weak torchlight, tall, menacing forms clad in worn leather and dark cloth, their faces grim beneath hoods. Brotherhood enforcers. Their eyes gleamed with cold intent, voices low and hard. "You can't leave," their leader growled, stepping forward, the hard edge of his voice cutting through the stale air like a knife. His body was rigid with control, but there was a dangerous fire in his eyes, a warning and a promise all at once. Ethan's jaw clenched. His gaze darted between Sam's fragile form and the encroaching threat. The weight of all he had endured boiled inside him. The years of searching, the countless dangers faced, the whispered secrets of the Brotherhood. "We have to fight," Ethan said, voice firm despite the fear threading through his veins. His hands gripped the makeshift torch tighter, knuckles whitening. Sam's lips twitched, a flash of something fierce surfacing behind his hollow eyes, a memory of the fight still burning within him despite the wear of captivity. Mace readied himself, muscles coiled like a predator's, every sense honed to the moment.